Have you ever picked up your phone to take a picture of your food, and after you take the picture, you look at your phone and surprisingly, this picture looks absolutely nothing like the food that is sitting right in front of you? I want you to know that there are plenty of things that you can do to fix it, and today I'm going to walk you through the 4 mistakes that are going to ruin your food photos every single time, and I'm going to tell you how to fix them. Hey guys, my name is Lindsey. I'm a commercial food photographer, and while I have plenty of experience in the world of commercial food photography, I understand that there are plenty of small food businesses like food truck owners and cottage food business owners that absolutely need to be able to take good quality images of their food. And you may not have expensive equipment to work with. You might not have a full artificial lighting setup. You may not even have a DSLR camera. But I want you to know that there are plenty of techniques that go into making a good food photo. And it has nothing to do with how expensive the equipment is that you're using. If you have access to a window with natural light and you have a smartphone that's been made in the last 10 years, I promise you that you can get the photos that you're looking for. And today, let's go through the 4 mistakes that you might be making and how to fix them. So mistake number 1, which is probably the most common mistake that I see, is the use of overhead lighting as your lighting source. And whenever I say overhead lighting, I essentially mean any light that is coming from the ceiling. So I'm talking about things like recessed lighting, pendant lighting, a light that's coming from a ceiling fan, any lighting that is above your head and shining down, overhead lighting. So there's 2 reasons why overhead lighting does not look good whenever you're taking pictures of food. One is if you're trying to do a flat lay, you're trying to do an overhead shot, which I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. But if you have your phone and the food is beneath you and the lighting is above you and it's shining down, what's going to happen is there's going to be a shadow of your hand and the phone on your food, and nobody wants that. You don't want a shadow of your phone on your food. So that's one reason why you don't want to do that. The second reason why you don't want to use overhead lighting is because it's not flattering for food photos. It's not flattering for taking a picture of a person either. For example, if you're trying to take a picture of me and I had a light that was coming right above my head, think about when you're sitting at a booth in a restaurant and they have one of those pendant lightings right in the middle of the booth and it's shining down and you see shadows underneath the nose and long shadows underneath the chin and even underneath the eyes. It's not flattering for a person for there to be overhead lighting. But if you're using overhead lighting on food, it's not emphasizing the color, and it's certainly not emphasizing the texture if the light is coming straight down. It's making that image really flat. So those are the 2 big reasons why you don't want to be using overhead lighting for your food photos. If you can, you want to turn off absolutely every single light in the room that you are using to take the pictures of your food, and you want to get to a window with natural light. So if you are interested in seeing a step-by-step guide and seeing me go through the whole process of setting up a window to take pictures, and I promise it does not take long, maximum 2 minutes, you can get a setup going. So if you want to see that step-by-step process, make sure that you subscribe to my channel. The next video that's going to go up is going to be all about lighting. The second mistake that you might be making when it comes to taking pictures of your food is choosing the wrong angle for the specific food that you're taking a picture of. And there are definitely foods that you can use multiple angles on a single dish or on a single food item, and it's still going to look good. There are certainly angles for specific food items that look the best. I'm going to talk about those in a minute, but I think what's really important to master are 2 specific angles when it comes to taking pictures of food. And I'm going to touch on those. So the overhead shot or the flat lay shot, which I just mentioned before, that's essentially where you have your phone. It is right on top of whatever food item that you're taking a picture of. And then there's also the head-on shot. So I'm talking about turning your phone this way. You also may have seen people turn their phone upside down. This is a really great way to take a head-on shot as well. An overhead shot, that's going to be ideal for foods like pizza or pies, things that are flat and wide, things that don't have a whole lot of height to them, but they do have a lot of texture on the surface. So also things like pastries would be really good, cinnamon rolls, cookies, muffins that have a lot of texture on the top. All of those really, really great options to use an overhead position for taking photos of those food items. And so when it comes to the head-on angle, in order to get the best image possible with that particular angle. You're going to want to work with foods like stacked sandwiches that have a lot of different ingredients and layers, maybe a burger. Another option that looks really good is if you have a really tall cake. If you do wedding cakes, there's a lot of texture on the outside and decorations on the outside. That looks really nice. It also looks really good if you have a tall cake or even a 3-layer cake and you cut a slice out of it and you want to get a really good picture of the interior of the cake and the layers and whatever filling that you've got in there. The head-on shot is absolutely ideal for taking pictures of foods like that. Also, not just for food, but for drinks too. If you are taking pictures of any type of drink in a clear glass, especially if it has some type of garnish or layers, ice, you want to really get a picture of that condensation on the outside of that glass too. The head-on shot is really, really great for that. So now let's talk about the third mistake that you might be making when it comes to taking pictures of your food, and that is using an unbalanced composition. And whenever I say composition, I don't just mean the way the image is composed, if you're familiar with that terminology. I do mean that, but I also mean what items you also have in this shot, how the image is composed from a picture perspective, and also how the image is composed from a background and prop perspective too. So whenever it comes to taking pictures of your food, and I will say this over and over again, the most important thing whenever you're taking a picture of your food is that the eye is drawn directly to the food or to the drink or whatever it is that you're taking a picture of. We want it to be the most important thing in the shot. And so in order for that to happen, we have to compose the shot in such a way that it looks the most interesting, and the first thing that our eyes notice is the food or the drink that we're supposed to be looking at. So from a compositional standpoint, from the way the image is composed, I would say just to be on the safe side, whenever you're first starting out, I would take your images and keep the food or the drink along the center line of the shot. That doesn't mean that it has to be perfectly centered, but find the center line of the frame and keep it in that center line. You can have a little bit more headroom if you want to. You can have it a little bit higher depending on how you want it to look, but keeping it on that center line is going to be really, really beneficial. The other aspect of composition that I mentioned is what you have included in the shot as far as props, as far as the background. And when you are new to taking pictures of food, the biggest thing that I can tell you is to do your best to keep it as simple as possible in the beginning. I know that it can be really tempting whenever you're taking pictures and you want to sprinkle the ingredients that are on the outside, or you want to use a lot of napkins or a lot of other props, silverware, plates, all kinds of things you want to include in the shot to make it look more interesting. But I will tell you that if you can get a shot to look really good with just the food on the plate or on some parchment paper even, then you can move from there to incorporate more items. Keeping it simple in the beginning, whether that be from a compositional standpoint by keeping things on the center line, and also from a prop perspective by not making the image look too cluttered or by having too many loud things that are competing with the food or drink itself, is going to be really beneficial at bringing the eye to the food or the drink in the image. The last mistake that you might be making when it comes to taking pictures of your food is over editing your images. And I know that it can be really, really tempting whenever you want the food or the drink that you just took a picture of to pop off of the screen. You want the colors to look good. You want it to be really crisp and really clear. And I understand all of that, and I am with you. That's what I want whenever I take pictures of my food too. But whenever it comes to editing those images, you want to keep things a little bit more minimal than you might think. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into detail in this particular video about all of the editing settings that I think that you should be using. So be prepared to take a screenshot or pause the video and jot these things down, because I'm going to put up on the screen the adjustments that I think are the best to make first whenever it comes to editing your food photos. But before I do that, I really want to make sure that you understand how important it is to try to avoid using the pre-made filters inside any social media app, even apps like Lightroom, which I absolutely love, and I will do a tutorial on how to use the Lightroom app on your phone to edit your food photos. The pre-made filters that are in that, I don't recommend jumping to those. I know that it sounds really difficult and really time consuming, but I promise once you do this a few times and you get used to the adjustments that you like and you get used to the adjustments that you need to make, it will be no time at all before you're making photo edits in less than 2 minutes. So I'm going to pop up on the screen just a few of the settings that I think are really best to adjust right after you take your food photo. So the very first thing that you want to do is you want to adjust the exposure in your image. And your goal whenever you are adjusting your exposure is to make sure that the whites in your image, or the highlight parts of your image, any part of the image that looks even close to white, you don't want it to be blown out. And by blown out, I will show you a picture of an image that's too blown out and you'll understand what I mean whenever you see it. And so you want to make sure that the highlights are balanced and the exposure is balanced. And that's just going to take a few seconds of you moving the slider around and figuring out what you like. So adjusting the exposure, you're going to want to adjust the white balance too. So depending on if you have an iPhone or an Android, all of these adjustments inside of your camera app are going to look a little bit different. I'm just going to show you what it looks like on an iPhone because that's what I have. So adjusting the white balance, you're going to want to make sure that obviously the whites in the image are white, that they don't lean orange, and that they also don't lean blue. So we want to keep the white balance set in such a way that all of the colors in the image are true to real life, essentially. That's what the goal of white balance is. So aside from adjusting your exposure and adjusting the white balance, we're going to go in and right after we do those two things, we're going to decrease the highlights. And the amount at which you decrease the highlights is going to really depend on the image itself. So some images I take the highlights down a lot, and some images I don't take it down very much at all. It's just going to depend on your particular preference for how you like your images to look, and you'll figure that out on your own. After you decrease the highlights, you're going to want to lift the shadows. Again, just like with the highlights, sometimes I lift the shadows a lot, and sometimes I don't lift the shadows much at all if the image already has pretty faint shadows. I'm not going to want to lift them too much, but if the shadows are looking really dark and I feel like it needs to be lifted a lot, then I will. Just depends on how I feel the image itself looks. So we've gone over adjusting the exposure, adjusting the white balance, decreasing the highlights, lifting the shadows, and last but not least, and here's where color comes into play, we are going to increase the vibrance. Now, I don't want you to touch the saturation until you adjust your vibrancy first. So the vibrance is going to adjust the midtones in your image. The saturation is going to adjust the colors, every single color in your whole image. It's going to lift up those colors and make them pop more. Now, that may sound like a good thing, but again, I'll show you an example of what happens whenever you crank the saturation too much. And sometimes you get a little bit editing blind and you're editing your picture and you don't even notice that you've completely blown out the colors. So I would suggest adjusting the vibrancy just a little bit and seeing if that gives you the look that you're going for before you try to bump up the saturation at all. So I know that all of those adjustments sound like a lot, and I mentioned that they were minor adjustments. I really want you to think about them as minor adjustments. And also the next few videos that I'm going to make, we're going to go over lighting. In the next video, we're going to go over composition. In the video after that, we're going to go over editing in the video after that. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel and that you are following along, because we're going to go into detail about each of those things in the coming series. All right, guys, that is it. Thank you so much for watching this video. And if you found it helpful, make sure you give me a thumbs up. And if you don't want to miss any of the videos I've got coming up about lighting, composition, editing, and everything in between, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. And if you have any ideas about videos that you'd like to see, if there are things that you're struggling with that you need some help with, let me know, leave me a comment. So until next time, cheers.